Hi everyone, and welcome to the second episode or the second video of our Lacanian chalkboard. And today I will try to clarify the importance of putting psychoanalysis in dialogue with science. Obviously, this is not an easy question to answer. Is psychoanalysis a science? Is it not? But we need to have a more intricate, a more complicated, complex relation with this topic, nuanced relation with this topic. So psychoanalysis is far from defining its relation to or its dialogue with science, or more precisely, with which science. We're not going to talk about which science today. We're going to talk science in terms of what is scientific, what is non-scientific according to Popper, Kuhn, and Lakatos. I was going through the methodology of research programs. As you know, I'm a member of associate at APOLA, which is an institution that takes psychoanalysis as a scientific research program based on Lakatos. And I was going through it for some different questions, but I thought maybe I should do a video on that as well. So Lakatos writes a page right at the beginning. In the last few years, I have been advocating a methodology of a scientific research program which solves some of the problems which both Popper and Kuhn failed to solve. Now, I'm going to try to explain those problems in 2 or 3 citations. Obviously, the subject is much more complicated than that, but as you know, or you may not know, Popper proposed a needed criterion of demarcation regarding science and non-science. He's stating that a theory can be scientific even if there's no evidence in its favor, and it may be pseudoscientific even with all available evidence in its favor. So according to Popper, a theory which is not refutable by any conceivable event is non-scientific. Irrefutability is not a virtue of a theory, as people often think, but a vice. Conjectures and Refutations. By the way, Popper challenged psychoanalysis a couple of times, and here's a citation for you. But what kind of clinical responses would refute to the satisfaction of the analyst not merely a particular analytic diagnosis, but psychoanalysis itself? And have such criteria ever been discussed or agreed upon by analysts? I don't think psychoanalysis has a very definitive answer to that. Maybe we need to change the terms a little bit to place psychoanalysis into a scientific oriented discipline, and I think that's where Lakatos comes in. Now, Thomas Kuhn came along to address the problem Popper created, namely that if a theory is able to state a condition which is refutable, that would differentiate science from pseudoscience, which is complicated. Kuhn proposed a scientific revolution, which is an almost irrational change of commitment. Kuhn writes, this is the structure of scientific revolutions. In this and other ways besides, normal science repeatedly goes astray. And when it does, that is, the profession can no longer evade anomalies that subvert the existing tradition of scientific practice, then begins the extraordinary investigations that lead the profession at last to a new set of commitments, a new basis for the practice of science. Change of commitment. Lakatos then asks himself, all that's left for us then is to accept that the demarcation between science and pseudoscience is a mixture of religious-like belief combined with individual social and cultural backgrounds, referring to that change of commitment. That's where Lakatos presents the research program. That's why he presents it. And the research program is composed by a hardcore, something that is not ready from the start. It develops slowly. The core is irrefutable by the methodological decision of its proponents. Anomalies must lead to changes only in the protective belt of auxiliary hypothesis and initial conditions. This is page 48. They are defined, the research programs, they are defined by methodological decisions. They are falsifiable. They must be presumed refutable in a given context or against certain conceivable or observable assumptions. And they are conventional. Their elements are axioms. And then he has the protective belt. Protective belt is the set of auxiliary hypotheses around a scientific theory's hardcore. When anomalies arise, they are attributed to flaws in the protective belt and not the hardcore itself. The belt can be adjusted, expanded, or modified. Now, the attempt to insert psychoanalysis into a scientifically oriented field has been abandoned by most of our field. Lacan tried to approximate psychoanalysis to science many times. I believe he did so more often than he tried to push it away from science. But for some reason, only a few citations are always repeated where Lacan talks that psychoanalysis is a praxis. But if you look closely, Lacan he's said so many times how he had scientifically oriented expectations for psychoanalysis. And why do I insist on scientifically oriented? Because, and not just science, not just scientifically, because, well, the term science deserves a whole video for us to, well, try to use it as I believe Lacan was trying to use for psychoanalysis with the letters. He tried to write psychoanalysis. By the way, this is a distinction we're going to make in the next video, I believe. A other body, the subject. Sorry. Back to our text. Lacan left an unfinished work. I don't know why, taken as complete. But his unfinished work, because who knows what he would have written if he'd stayed alive, I don't know, 5 more years. But his unfinished work offer clues for how to develop psychoanalysis further. And I believe this task, this task seems neglected. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do see a lot of repetition, a lot of Lacanian theory sprinkled over Freud. Lacan left a theory capable of challenging intuitive categories like inside and outside, interior and exterior, capabilities that seem to have been forgotten by the field, capabilities that, by the way, would be helpful for us to place psychoanalysis in opposition to those. The things that would help us placing psychoanalysis in opposition to those disciplines, because let's face it, psychiatry, psychology, neuroscience, apart from neuropsychoanalysis, which is its own project, they take psychoanalysis as a prehistoric discipline. And partially because of our lack of rigor, I believe. So this theory, not finished, but what we have provides us with ways of eliminating binary, individualistic, nihilistic logics that are still in place in psychoanalysis. The topological surfaces, they challenge categories of inside, outside, interior, exteriors. They provide a very different way of doing clinic. This is relevant for how psychoanalysis conceive reality, the body in mixing, the signifiers. Very sophisticated theory of the signifiers Lacan has. Psychoanalysis risks becoming old news, as I was saying, partially through its own choices. Lacan often commented on the difficulty psychoanalysis has in agreeing upon a concept. And basically today the attitude is either you experience it or you can reach those concepts. This makes it difficult for sociologists, anthropologists, linguists, economists, or anyone else to engage with psychoanalysis. Psychoanalytic field is often claims to be subversive without noticing how frequently it operates under the same logic as the very disciplines it aims to antagonize, to oppose. When we assert someone has their own unconscious, own desire, own jouissance, own demand, there's a logic behind it that the body produces those things, and that the individual some kind is responsible for that. The biological body has a major role in that. It's not very different from what we see here, including neuroscience. To say that the subject needs to implicate themselves it's a complicated thing to say. The subject of the unconscious cannot implicate himself. And is this true for any situation? Psychoanalysis withdrew from the scientific conversation, claiming it was not a science, without clarifying its relation to science. Even though both Lacan and Freud repeatedly stated that it was, or at least was a science, or at least it was scientifically oriented. We still operate with classical scientific notions of matter and neutrality, when we could, after quantum, reevaluate the notion of matter, which is in current psychoanalysis is what we think when we think of the real, flesh and bones, the body. This is not a novelty. This is not the real I am going to present here. Matter is no longer the most real, the most certain. It's certainly not the real in psychoanalysis. The neutrality of the analyst, that idea that the analyst can be somehow not part of that game, it's not true in scientific standards. The scientist is part of the experiment. Psychoanalysis is a clinic. I don't know how it became the favorite method of film analysis, but it's a clinic of the particular, of the case by case, where love in one is not the same as love in the other. The Lacanian perspective on X in radicality, clinically, there's none, because it will be case by case. You can do extended psychoanalysis, yes, but too much extended psychoanalysis and not sufficient clinic. A clinic where the subject and the other are always in the mixing of otherness. A clinic where the subject is the clinical text. The clinical text is the subject. How do we operate? How do we read that text? Now back to the science. The legitimacy of a knowledge lies in its rigor. We don't work with blood samples, microscopes, neuroimaging, so the survival of the hypothesis of the unconscious depends on how we conceptualize it and develop it and justify it. We'll never be able to see desire or to check the chemical balance of libido. We need to go the other way. The aim for a scientific research program in psychoanalysis is to avoid it sliding into the realm of biology or neuroscience, as if psychoanalysis was another discipline waiting for the confirmation of neuro. Raymond Talley wrote a good book on that. It's Aping Mankind, and there's a chapter called Saving Humanities, as if all other disciplines were just waiting for neuroscience to come and say, well, no, you are legit. Apart from that, the goal is to contribute to the development of the field, overcome prejudice, and finally to be able to rationally and firmly oppose what is often criticized by the field: psychiatric knowledge, medical knowledge, psychology, CBT. And finally, safeguard is its legitimacy and the potential articulation with neighboring disciplines in the public space. We need to be able to talk about psychoanalysis in the public space, if psychoanalysis intends to occupy the places that it intends to occupy. So that's it for today. Thank you very much. See you next time.